That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody. Let's engage. I was gonna wear my special suit, but I don't really have time today, so we're not gonna do that. And I don't know if Discovery or Strange New Worlds would deserve me to put on a suit. We'll see. If I don't particularly love it, then I'm not gonna wear a suit. I did love this season, which is kind of ironic that I ended up not wearing a suit, but I have to get going somewhere very soon, so I don't really have time to change and do all that, so here we are. Season 4 of Enterprise. This is the best season of Enterprise. The show was finally finding its ground, finding what it needed to be. There's some hiccups, but most of it solid. And we'll never get a season 5. Because the show got canceled. But there's so much to love here. This is honestly one of my favorite seasons of Star Trek in general. I mean, it's obviously behind all of Deep Space Nine, minus maybe Season 1. But then again, Season 1 has Duet. It's definitely above the early seasons of TNG. May even be above most of Voyager for me. And the original series. It's just one of the best seasons of Trek. Ever. Excuse me. Apologies. But yeah, I love this season. Instead of doing like a season-long arc, which Season 3 did with his indie, these are more little 3-part arcs spread across things. The weakest episode is near the end. We'll get to that. But the first 2 episodes, which are probably the weakest, or I thought were the weakest, are still pretty fun. They were kind of left with this whole time travel thing at the end of Season 3. So it's either you completely ignore it, or you acknowledge it and move forward. Because for all intents and purposes, the real Season 4 begins at Episode 3. But the first 2 episodes, while it's stupid, is a lot of fun. You know, aliens helping Nazis. A hero's gotta stop it, gotta fix the timeline. You know, like, it's stupid, but it was a lot of fun. But Season 4, Episode 3 is really where the actual meat begins. You know, and they just completed the Xindi arc, so Tucker goes to Vulcan with Paul, and we get more of their relationship stuff and her dealing with her arranged marriage, and it's all really good. Really, really, really good stuff. Move on to episodes 4 through 7, where we deal with the augments. Augments being, you know, like Con Noon Singh and everything. And we get Brent Spiner back. This is awesome. Brent Spiner being Eric Sung. I don't know if he's actually related to Khan, but I don't think it really matters. I don't think he is. It's more of what he's trying to do, you know. But Brent Spiner gives this wonderful performance, as always, even though he's not Data, of being this loving father of these augments and how the augments get out of hand. But, you know, I could spend probably like 40 minutes just talking about that, but instead I'll leave Lore Runner for you to watch in the description to see more in detail, but it was good. Episodes 7 through 8 is another 2-parter, or is a 3-parter through episode 7 through 9, which there's some terrorist bombings, and Forrest, who's been like the dude in the first 3 seasons, is just gone. He's dead. We'll see him one more time, but in a different context, but we'll get to that. But this goes the whole thing where they go to Vulcan, and we see the corruption of the High Command, and it kind of retcons a lot of the earlier portrayals of the Vulcans in the first 2 seasons, being more of the High Command than the actual Vulcans. And this sets up a big thing, because in the background, all this stuff that's going on, the leader in charge of the High Command is actually working with a Romulan, because they were trying to sow dissent in the background. Kind of like the Yusong Vong in New Jedi Order, right? Like, they are sowing seeds from behind the scenes trying to dismantle things. Which is very important, because had Season 5 been a thing, we would have gotten the Romulan War. The Romulan War, which as far back as TOS was mentioned, so they were probably going to explore it in the show. And there's a lot of setup here, because this was the biggest setup for that. But that 3-parter was really good. Episode 10, Daedalus, it's alright. It's mostly just about loss and moving on. But there's been other stories that have done that a lot better. So it's just there. It's not horrible. It's not great either. I really have nothing to say about episode 11. It's okay, though. Episode 12, 13, and 14, though, we deal with Andorians and Tellarites, and deal with the first real alliance between the two, all thanks to the Enterprise crew. But another big important thread in the background is, of course, that the Romulans are trying to make sure that the Tellarites and the Andorians wouldn't come to an agreement, because it would be dangerous for them to form an alliance. So again, we see the threads of the Romulans being a problem. Episode 15 and 16 is like the EU. By the EU, I mean the Star Wars EU, where you take something that didn't necessarily need to be explained, because a lot of things were just taken as, this is what it is, because, for example, Star Wars fans just accept Episodes 4 fight with Vader and Obi-Wan, even though it's barely a fight. But we understand, and this is something that Lore Runner also mentioned. The time period it was made in, they just didn't have the oomph of Episode 5's fight, or Episode 6 fights, or the flashiness of the prequels. So it's just, like, it's boring. And the same thing with the original TOS series. Klingons just didn't have ridges. They looked like humans. Budget. And they didn't fully have what they wanted to do back then. So then you get to Deep Space Nine, and they make a little joke about it. But the issue with that is, and I've had this debate with people about other things, though it's more gray with, like, there's this one friend on Discord when we were discussing Predator and Alien, where I said, well, in universe, if you have an alien head in the background of Predator 2, does that not mean inherently within universe? Like, obviously it's just a reference, but now the question has to be begged, does that mean they're connected, But that one's a little bit more gray, but had, somebody mentioned it, like, what's that thing? That's more specific. By Worf saying we don't talk about it, even though it's meant as a joke, you've now put into the story a question. Even if you just use it as a joke and don't actually address it, since the character in universe addressed it, like, if Worf never made that joke, then we can just assume, the budget back then, which it was, but by saying it in universe, it demands an explanation. So this 2-parter isn't the best, but it gives us an explanation for the Klingons in TOS. Now, I've seen what Discovery Klingons look like, and I don't know if there's any way to rectify that. We'll see when we get there, because I will be reviewing it. But I hate the Klingon design in that show. Sorry, from what I've seen, it looks god-awful, but it's further discussion. We also get the early version of Section 31. And that read apparently works for them, which is interesting. Which they probably would have also further developed next season, but there is no such thing as a next season. And then we get to episode 17. This is the horrible episode. Like, legitimately, like, bad. It's with the Orions and these Orion women, and all the men are being seduced, and it's just an excuse for sexy, for the sake of sexy. It's pointless, it's actually kind of boring, and it's not fun. Outside of the Trip and DePaul stuff, I didn't care for it. So a solid dip. Also, of course, I talked about the Andorian stuff earlier. Shran's obviously back. Shran's amazing. I love Shran. He's the best. I just want to make sure I reiterate that. And oh my god, a season 5 with him would have been great, because there were rumors he might have been a part of the main crew as like a main cast member, which would have been amazing. But we don't have that, so rip. Episode 18 and 19 are such a joy and a whole lot of fun. In a Mirror Darkly is 2 episodes that take place in the Mirror Universe. So, evil everybody. And actually fixes a plot hole, or a loose thread. According to Lore Runner, who did some research, earlier last season there was an episode where they found the, like, TARDIS. It wasn't the TARDIS, but it was a ship that was bigger on the inside. And that was originally going to be a ship from the future, but they didn't want to cause any continuity issues, so they didn't do it. But in the original series TOS episode, Tholian Web, one of the ships goes missing. So it shows up in the past, but in a different universe. And by doing that, you don't mess with the continuity of the main timeline, and you explain where the ship went in the original series, which is brilliant. Again, tying up those threads. So now when that ship is gone in TOS, we know that it traveled back in time to an alternate timeline into here. And so A Mirror Darkly is a really fun 2-parter. We get to have a recreated set of the old classic show. And all the people that are dead are kind of like in the same positions they should be in, which is really cool. We get to see the original outfits again. Hoshi actually gets to be the most useful she's ever been, and the most interesting, where she ends up becoming the empress of the known universe for the foreseeable future. I don't know what Discovery will say. I know there's a Mirror episode in Discovery, so I guess we'll see when we get there, but, you know, as far as in this time period, Hoshi takes control. It's also the last time we get to see Forrest, because it's a different version of him. So that was it's a really good 2-parter though. And then we have episode 20 and 21, which not only shows the beginning of the Federation, but deals with bigoted humans. And also deals with Trip and DePaul having a clone baby of each other, of like their DNA. What's really sad is this the last like real episode of Enterprise, and it ends on such a downer. I guess Trip, the actor's real wife, was pregnant at the time, and so the idea of his kid not surviving really got to him, just for the sake of the scene, but thinking about his child. So like at the end of the episode, they learn that the kid's gonna die because it's a clone, not because it wouldn't actually work. The clone is dying. And so he starts bawling. It's excellently well done. And, you know, DePaul is stone-faced. Because what is she supposed to do? But it is interesting, at the final shot of the episode, she reaches out her hand to his, and they hold each other's hands to support one another. And then the episode just ends. It ends on such a downer. But it is really interesting, you know, the bad guy of the episode was played by RoboCop, which was pretty cool. But I don't really want to get too much into it. You can watch the Lore Runner's video on it if you want more in depth, but it's still relevant today. It really is. On both sides of issues. I think what I got out of it most of all, though, was, one guy says, why, I hate Vulcans, da-da-da-da-da. And Trip goes, is it the ears? Is it that a lot of them are vegetarian? Have you ever actually met one? Talked to one? And I think this applies to whatever. Because change, as Lore Runner has said, comes from the macro, or the micro, not really the macro. Like, if you're on one side or the other, right? Today wants you to be enemy, right? But you get two people of opposing views, but you're not trying to fight one another. You legitimately try to get to know one another, right? Even if you have disagreements. If you show that you genuinely care, then that bond will start to form. So if you got one political owl or another one and you're friends, then you won't see issues as so black and white. You will be more inclined to not believe all are evil because you have friends, people that you care about that happen to be of that whatever. And if you remember back in season 1 and season 2, Trip and Archer were kind of against Vulcans. I'm sure they didn't shoot them on sight, but they weren't exactly friendly. Now, the first episode, Archer threatened to assault T'Pol. And look where they are now. But that's because their opinions changed on the micro level. They spent time with T'Pol, so their opinions changed to Vulcans over time based on their experience with just her. They didn't need to spend time with every single Vulcan, they just needed her. And by spending time with her, their perceptions changed. And by her time spent with them, her perceptions of humans changed. And that's how change happens on the micro level with individuals. So I think that's important. But overall, it was a great two-parter, brought only down slightly by Mayweather's relationship, because that was rather boring. And not to be mean, because I've taken one intro drama class. I would like to do more, I would like to act, but I've not done much. So I feel weird to critique somebody else for it. But Mayweather's performance is rather flat, as if he were a Vulcan, but he's not playing a Vulcan, so it's, it's just rather bland, which makes the rest of it kind of bland. It's also just not that interesting of a plot to begin with. But other than that, it was a solid two-parter. And then we get to the finale. These are the voyages. If this had been in the middle of the season, it would have been fine. The issue is that it's the finale to the entire series, and we'll never get another one. 75% of the episode is Jonathan Frakes from The Next Generation. Captain Riker. Or Commander Riker. Whatever. This is sandwiched in between an actual episode of TNG. And he's looking back at the Enterprise crew through, the holodeck. Like a history lesson. And would be cool if it was in the middle of the season. But this is the finale. This isn't about you. We had 7 seasons with you. Is it cool to see him? And Diana? Yeah. But this wasn't about them. We've spent 4 seasons getting to it's let's just say everybody likes the Star Wars prequels. I know not everybody does, but you watch episodes 1 and 2, you're actually really digging it. And then episode 3 is narrated by Luke Skywalker, and 90% of it is about Luke. Just looking back on old events. Okay, but I spent time, I got invested into these new characters. You had your story. Why are you interfering with someone else's on their finale episode? And to ruin it all on top of that, Tucker dies at the end. Just unceremoniously dies. It's in the history books. He died. Though there is one moment I'd want to mention, just because at the end when the Federation's forming, finally, there's this last moment where Archer comes in and just gives T'Pol a genuine hug. Which was so heartwarming because he started the show threatening to hit her. and ends the show as really close friends. Now, that's pretty much it for my Season 4 review. We will be getting into the novels, which are not canon. It's not like the Star Wars Expanded Universe. It was never canon. These never were considered canon. However, I highly doubt they will ever make a show in this era again. I think they're long past that. I mean, Discovery and Strange New Worlds all take place before the original series. So I doubt they'll ever do anything with that again. If anything, they might do stuff after Undiscovered Country, before TNG, because there's a little bit of a gap there. But they will never go that far back again. So I will be going through the books that take place after this episode. Starting with Kobayashi Maru sometime. Because, well, we're going to get to see the Romulan War in there. We're going to get to see the real rise of the Federation. And they're going to retcon Trip's death, because he's going to join Section 31. And so it does kind of work that way, though, because the history books, because this is, again, what Riker's seeing in the official history, Trip died. But what if that's simply not true? At least when we get into these books, it'll actually be from the timeline, the Enterprise crew's timeline's perspective, instead of from Riker's. So we'll get into that in the future. But overall, this season was great. There were some hiccups. Episode 17 and Daedalus and a couple others. But overall, like, the big arcs were really solid stuff. This is what the show should have been from the beginning. Archer is not the best captain. He's heavily flawed. But I kind of like that about him, as he's the first real captain. Reed has his moments. I wish he got more time to shine. Hopefully he will in these novels. Shran, Jeffrey Combs, is always a treat in everything he ever comes on. But the real heart, I think, the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, is Trip and T'Pol. One of the best couples in all fiction. But, yeah. Really enjoyed Enterprise. I think more so than I did the first time. Season 1 and 2 are not perfect, but there's a lot to love there. More than I thought there would be. And Season 3, for all of its hiccups, has some really good moments, too. But that's it, guys. I'll see you next time for the books, and then eventually, when we finish the Enterprise timeline, we'll get to Discovery. Till then, let's boldly go where no one has before. See you next time.